Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Coco Bandicoot here, and I am back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos once again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Klonoa Phantasy Reverie series for the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X/S, PC Steam, and of course the Nintendo Switch. So, last time, we did somehow manage to able to completely done everything in terms of the forms of Klonoa, Daughter Phantasy, by showing you guys the last few bits of that game, which appears to be none other than the extra vision, but also with the forms of the other three modes that we somehow managed to able to check out, which there are the music player, alongside with the forms of the movie viewer, and finally the time attack, which is pretty self-explanatory, just like the Wii version of the game, except the fact that there is no other additional content, like additional costume changes, or potentially speaking of with the reverse mode, and especially noticeable with the gallery viewer with all these characters and all that stuff. Kind of a bummer though, but at the very least that's something I suppose when it comes to able to actually receive something once you finish the main game. So, and also we did somehow check out a brief gameplay on hard mode, and as a result, yeah, it was just there for the sake of the forms if you really want to be up for the challenge. So, today for this video, folks, is about the fact that since that we've already completely done one game out of two games in this entire compilation, so today we're about to jump right into Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil on the Phantasy Reverie series compilation. So because of that, generally speaking, like I said before, since in the ending portion of Daughter Phantasy on this entire compilation is that we're now onto the halfway point in terms of this entire compilation. So because of that though, yeah, let's hop into this, shall we? And of course, I'm actually really looking forward to able to actually going back onto Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil again, except the fact the noticeable difference is this time it's gonna be in HD for starters, and of course I'll explain more about that as soon as when this particular loading screens are basically done, and we'll watch this particular cutscene right here. Huzzah indeed. Although, I'm afraid to tell you, this will be the last time we're going to be hearing that awesome jingle, because as far as I'm usually concerned, about the fact that I have no idea what's going to be up next for the entire Klonoa retrospective of games, as far as I'm concerned. Although, we should probably save that particular topic until for later, because even then though, yeah, let's just go ahead and check out the actual option settings, and I think for the most part, it's pretty much exactly the same as Daughter Phantasy, except the fact that the actual UI is actually a little bit different, for I've noticed, and of course, I'm gonna have to able to turn off the actual tutorial thing right here, because I'm pretty sure I already know about this game basically, specifically Klonoa 2 in mind. So either way though, I think that should be all set. So let's jump right into the new game right here. And of course, just like Daughter Phantasy, is that we pretty much have to stuck with the forms of 3 save files, as opposed to in the original, where basically though is about the fact that we had whopping 16 save files on the original PlayStation 2 version, which I will admit though, that is pretty insane if you ask me. Well, just like the forms of how it does it for Daughter Phantasy, as a matter of fact. So of course, just like the forms of how it does it on Daughter Phantasy on the Phantasy Reverie series, is that before you start the game up, basically though it's about the fact that you have a choice between easy or normal mode, where basically easy mode will give you more hearts. Likely, for instance, we were able to have 5 hearts, and as far as I'm aware, the damage output is actually like 1/3 reduced on easy mode, and of course you're able to have infinite amount of lives. So, and as far as normal mode is concerned, obviously you're still able to have yourselves 3 hearts, and you're able to have damage reduced for the sake of 1 reduced, you know, just like the forms of how it does in the original PlayStation 2 version, and of course you're still able to have lives. So, and on top of that, depending on what mode you go into, either on easy or normal mode, easy mode will allow you to able to have the wind bullets were able to shoot even further, whilst compared to our normal mode, it plays pretty much like the forms of how it does in the original counterpart on the PlayStation 2. So without further ado, let's jump right into Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil, except this time on the Phantasy Reverie series compilation. So, Yeah, and I'm honestly looking forward to able to actually, like, the kind of thing about it, this is the second time we're going to be playing through Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil, for our channel, just because no matter what though, for what I've heard about the fact that Ray the Flying Squirrel did already technically tackle for this game on the original PlayStation 2 version back in 2021. And here we are now in 3 years later, in 2024, we are now decided able to tackle through the remastered version of this game. Or technically like a remake of any sorts, because obviously aside from the fact you're able to see some amazing visuals, and on top of that, it'll be pretty cool to see, not only for the sake of the forms of Leona, but it's also with the forms of Tat, alongside with the forms of Polka, and finally, most notably, Lolo in this very cute art style, at least as far as I'm usually concerned. Now, you do able to realize about something, unlike the original version of Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil, for certain cutscenes, is that you do realize about the fact that certain characters no longer have outlines. So because of that though, and it's also worth noting for, because originally on the PlayStation 2 version, most of the character models are like cel-shaded look. So, yeah, that begs the question about the fact that the actual art style is incredibly different compared to the original counterparts. So, yeah, that begs the question throughout. So, either way, and of course, just like the ones how it does it in Klonoa Daughter Phantomile on the Phantasy Reverie series compilation version, obviously you do have the option to able to actually like fast forward certain dialogue, or potentially speaking, you can able to skip the entire cutscene by holding down the button and all that stuff. So, and as far as I'm aware, yeah, I got able to keep on pressing either A or B buttons so we can able to go through the next dialogue text boxes here and there, so we can pretty much expect to know about the fact that, for whatever reason, I'm pretty much used to with the forms of how the fact that the dialogue displays itself. Although, to be fair though, because I'm pretty much used to with Klonoa Daughter Phantomile for some reason. Well, I don't know about you, because it's been about 3 years since we've last played Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil, since the original PlayStation 2 version, since, as I mentioned this earlier, since in 2021, and I will admit though right away, Lolo in this particular version of this game, she looks a lot more cuter this time around, which I don't know about you, because I'm pretty sure no matter what though, is about the fact that every time when, well, I don't know about you, because it's been quite a while since I actually have last played this entire Klonoa Phantasy Reverie series, and I apologize for my commentary because it's a little bit slightly iffy at one point. Although, I will tell you for this point right away, it's about the fact that just like the ones and how it does it in Daughter Phantomile, I was originally trying to able to read all these dialogue text boxes, but I'm afraid to tell you is about the fact that I'm not exactly great at reading, unlike Twilight Sparkle, that she obviously is a master of reading, because gee, no wonder why that she owns or rents so many books on the library, which, truth be told though, because of how the fact that she's so obsessed with books, you know? But I digress. So, yeah, a few things I want to explain for this point today is about the fact that today's date, of course, there is the 12th of March today, in some cases in 2024 today. I'll explain more details about the forms of what has been happening ever since during the forms of about a couple of days ago at some form or another, but somehow, no matter what though, is about the fact that, and also, it's for those of you probably wondering, yes, unlike the original version of Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil, where basically the actual text speech bubbles, or specifically the actual text here and there, usually just goes a little bit slower on the original PlayStation 2 version. On the remastered this time around though, is that these text words now shows up immediately. So thankfully we don't have to worry about the forms of how in fact with all this slow appearance for the sake of the forms of those words or anything else like that. So then of course we can pretty much expect to know about the fact that most of these levels in Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil is actually a lot longer than the forms of how it does it on the first game. So here we go on to Sea of Tears. So as we expected, if you ever played Klonoa Daughter Phantomile, the controls are basically identical to the forms of how it does it on the first game, except now about the fact that you can able to actually press one of those shoulder buttons that you can able to actually perform certain poses for Klonoa. Like, for example, since I'm still going to be playing this entire compilation on the Nintendo Switch version, so this means you're able to press the L and R button so you can able to actually perform certain poses, whilst unlike the PlayStation version, it was like still L1 and R1, and as far as the Xbox version, as far as I'm concerned, you're able to actually press the left bumper and the right bumper, and able to actually just to try to able to pull off certain victory poses for Klonoa, ranging from tossing a ring from the air, and on top of that with this amazing pose that I would try to able to show that off once we're able to try to deal with the forms of one of those boss fights coming up. So because of that though, yeah, we still have to go through specific tutorials at one point, which even then though, it was just the beginning. So anywho though, so and of course, just like the ones how it does it in Daughter Phantomile on the Phantasy Reverie series, the actual language is still basically Phantomile language, which I honestly don't mind about it too much. Although, I would have imagined about the fact that if the English dub exists, that would be pretty awkward at one form or another. Well, that might be besides the point. So, and of course, clocks can able to actually activate as checkpoints, so yeah, nothing right to hum about. So we can pretty much expect to know about the fact that this will be the entire 100% completion. The only thing we're probably not going to go for is that, much like in Daughter Phantomile, I don't think it's possible we can able to actually go after every single crystals, whilst unlike in Journey forms of it, not only Klonoa Moonlight Museum from the Bandai Wonder Swan, but it's also about the forms of Empire of Dreams, and even with Dream Champ Tournament, that usually we always goes after the forms of specific crystals so we can able to actually access to extra levels and all that stuff. I don't think it's going to be noticeable in Journey forms of not only the remastered versions of Klonoa 1 as well as Klonoa 2, like usually for the sake of time, but it's also with the original version as well, just because no matter what though, well, some of them are actually kind of easy for some levels, but I will admit though right away though, getting all these crystals is not my cup of tea or anything, but that'd be besides the point. So, and of course, as we expected, we're able to run into the forms of some new level obstacles from time to time, such as, for instance, we can able to hang on to these little floaty things right there, and also those cannons right there does kind of reminds me of the forms of going through launch stars in both Super Mario Galaxy as well as Super Mario Galaxy 2. Next, let's not forget ourselves with the forms of those large spring objects in Journey forms of Sonic Lost World, like you go through segment to segment. Although, to be fair though, it's about the fact that just like it wants how it does it in Klonoa Daughter Phantomile, the majority of the levels in this game is actually overall very linear. So, as a result though, if you go to the next segment, like if you go into the actual next cannon, likely also for this one right here, obviously there is no way we can able to actually backtrack unless if you really want to retry the entire stage again. So, potentially speaking out is about the fact that, yeah, just like the ones and how it does it in Daughter Phantomile, there is a way you can able to actually just a slight retry on the pause menu. So, even then though, I will admit though right away, I really love the soundtrack, and not only for the sake of the forms of Daughter Phantomile, but also with the forms of Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil, because I'll admit though, I love the actual musical soundtrack. So even then though, yeah, nothing else I can really say about the forms of Klonoa 2 in this particular remaster. It plays very similar to the forms of how it does on the PlayStation 2 version basically, except the fact that obviously the load times has now been reduced, and on top of that, I will admit though right away, I feel like that the graphics on the remastered version, it looks a lot more better to me though, than the forms of how it does on the PlayStation 2 version to me anyway, because there might be a couple of times though about the fact that for those of you who don't know, that Ray did some mention to me about something. When he originally did this game back in 2021 on the original version of the game, by the way, the most annoying aspect about the forms of that particular playthrough to him anyway is about the fact that every time when he goes into the actual transition between the forms of the next section alongside with the forms of the menu navigations here and there as well, for whatever reason our TV just keeps on blinking out, and eventually once we move on to that specific segment it just goes back up again, which that's a little bit annoyingly consistent. well, thankfully on the Switch remaster, or specifically a modern remastered version of Klonoa 2, thankfully that issue is no longer the case, because obviously no matter what though, as I said this before, the load times have now been reduced, and as a matter of fact though, it just managed able to make things a little bit more, well, faster for ourselves. So because of that though, it looks like we're not able to sort out with this particular bell right here, so just in case for plot significance. And I think suffice to say, I was off by 2 crystals for the sake of the forms of this stage. Well, at least I did try, but then again though, as I explained about this earlier, I don't think it's possible we can able to go for a true 100% reward. Although the only thing it's worth noting for is that once you do manage to obtain all 150 jewels or crystals to be exact, at least in each and every single level, you get one of those cool illustrations for the sake of the actual scrapbooks. So yeah, that's the only reward you can probably expect to get on for that specific requirement. But aside from all that stuff though, I just couldn't really be bothered about the forms of trying to able to achieve something like this. But then again, I apologize for my comment take is a little bit slightly iffy at some point. There's a reason for that, because potentially speaking though, after the events of this amazing Happy Mario 10 Day, which it already did happen since in 2 days ago roughly, because like I said before, it's about the fact that today's date is of course the 12th of March today, in some cases in 2024 today. Although, I was originally trying to able to explain about the forms of another thing just somehow came up to be. That's what appears to be the actual revealed for the sake of the forms of the Oscar-winning nominations, which I suppose we probably let Maxi will mention more about it until when he goes back onto Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, because recently he did somehow manage to got started with the forms of Silver Story just recently. So because of that though, yeah, he will explain more about that, and as you can tell about the fact that we somehow rescued one of those dolls right here. So I believe we're still able to go after all 6 of those doll pieces, and as a result, this way we will be able to actually get something rewarding if you do manage to able to save all of these dolls basically. So I believe we need to rescue for about a grand total of 16 dolls in order to able to actually get something that's very rewarding. So even though somehow we meet up with the forms of this weird character right here, which I think I can't really pronounce his name very well, but I was expecting about the fact that again it's been a very long time since we did somehow experience Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil since the original PlayStation 2 version. So, and yeah, let's get to the forms of the news discussion recently. Aside from the fact that we were expecting for Oscars, but then again no, Maxi will mention more about it if he gets onto it. So, first of all, we just want to point things out right away, as it turns out that the Knuckles the series is going to be coming into UK until 26th of April in 2024, the same day as in not only for the sake of the forms of the US version, but it's also with Canada as well. And as far as the forms of other regions like France, Italy, as well as the forms of other regions, as well as Australia as well, was expecting to able to release the actual series until the 27th of April. So that's one thing to put it, and I'm still looking forward to able to checking that out, especially notable concerning for the fact that I've been waiting that for quite some time, and exponentially speaking I'll just be looking forward to see what the roadmap actually turns out to be, for the sake of the forms of the long-awaited sequel to the forms of one of those Sonic movie franchise, which is of course Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Oh, and speaking of movie sequels, as you probably already expect, about the fact that recently we've actually got ourselves a full confirmation for the sake of the forms of what's going to be happening in the future, to be more specifically, until 2026. My goodness, that's going to be about 2 years from now. And because of that though, recently, as far as you probably already know, about the fact that the Super Mario Bros. Movie is going to return back onto the forms of the theater big screen until specifically the 28th of June, which means about the fact that maybe it's a possibility, about the fact that maybe it's like a good old boost for the box office earnings for that particular film in mind, despite the fact that that particular film already came out since almost a year ago. Well, to be more accurate though, 11 months ago at this point, so generally speaking though, man, time flies. So as it turns out, the second Mario movie has been officially been confirmed. So as a result, it's expected to be releasing at some point, as I said earlier, until 2026, to be more specifically, April the 3rd. So as I mentioned this earlier, it's going to be roughly about 2 years for now. So because of that though, yeah, that does seem an awfully a long time. Well, as a result, that's going to be roughly around that time when the Hunchback of Notre Dame is going to be 30 years old during that time. So because of that though, yeah, it's going to be a long wait, but I'm still pretty excited for it. Alongside with the forms of some other bunch of Mario related news has recently came up to be. So yeah, still I'm very excited for it. And in addition to that though, speaking of which though, is about the fact that we're able to actually realize about the fact that recently, we actually got ourselves a new spotlight just recently for the sake of the forms of one of those mobile games called Disney Magic Kingdoms, where basically though is about the fact that it's almost like a town simulation kind of game, focuses on the forms of the majority of the Disney characters and all that stuff. For whatever reason, out of nowhere, that's not only we somehow received update 80, but out of nowhere, the Ice Age characters are now coming onto Disney Magic Kingdom. So, or yeah, just that. So I have nothing else to say about it, especially because, relatively speaking, I haven't exactly experienced that game for myself, especially noticeable because I will admit that right away it's not my cup of tea either. Because every time whenever I do manage to boot up My Little Pony, specifically Magic Princess kind of game, where basically it's about the fact that every time whenever I was trying to able to get myself a freebie gem or anything else like that, and every time whenever I go into the forms of some free ads or anything else like that, Disney Magic Kingdoms always pops up in during the forms of one of those advertisements for the sake of the forms of some games made by Gameloft. And that's pretty annoying sometimes, I will admit that right away. But regardless of everything else though, it's about the fact that it's going to be a pretty strange collaboration with the forms of Ice Age is about to be coming onto the forms of Disney Magic Kingdoms for, you know, the iOS and all that stuff, despite the fact that it was still potentially being owned by 20th Century Fox. So that's as far as I was pretty much expecting for. So obviously you're still able to actually get yourself some bunch of characters based off from the Ice Age franchise, which is Sid, Diego, and Manny, and especially noticeable with Scrat as well, and maybe some others I could probably think about on top of my head, but that's besides the point. So, and as far as I'm aware, it's kind of hard to say, honestly, because I still find this to be a little bit of a strange collaboration. So either way, what's the next thing I was going to be mentioning about? Oh yeah, as it turns out, enduring at some point until the 11th of April sometime in the UK, it looks like about the fact that both The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario Bros. Wonder are up for the best games at BAFTA, stands for the British Academy of Film and Television Arts. So as a result, it's been happening soon as the nominees for the variety catalogs this year has been announced. Like 2 Nintendo games has prepared for able to actually go into the forms of that specific category. And those, like, specifically, for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is up for 6 nominations, and they are the Best Game and Audio Achievements, Game Design, Music, Narrative, and Technical Achievement. And as far as Super Mario Bros. Wonder is concerned, it's up for 4, and they are the Best Game, Family, Animation, and Multiplayer. So yeah, the 20th BAFTA Game Awards will be taking place at some point on the 11th of April. So yeah, and that's going to be specifically for the UK version as far as I'm aware. So yeah, I'm actually a little bit more optimistic to see how these specific rewards actually turns out to be. So, but then again, we'll have to wait until specifically until about a month later until that's going to be happening. So Oh, and speaking of something related to about a month later or somewhat, as it turns out recently, it's been 20 years ago since Winnie the Pooh Springtime with Roo did somehow came out since 2004. Although I will admit though right away, Springtime with Roo is probably perhaps one of my least favorite Winnie the Pooh movies I've ever seen. I mean, nothing remarkable or anything, but it does have some bit of funny moments between both Tigger and Rabbit when it comes to like arguments and stuff like that. But I will admit though right away is about the fact that I'm not a big fan of the actual narrative of that specific film in mind. Although it's basically like the Easter counterpart of the films of A Christmas Carol, except the fact that obviously no matter what though, that the only thing it disappoints me the most when it comes to while looking back at journey films of Winnie the Pooh Springtime with Roo film, I've noticed about the fact that there's a lack of the amount of characters. Like there's no Christopher Robin, or especially noticeable there's no Owl. We even know Gopher, and heck, even especially noticeable with the films of, I think that's as far as I can try and able to explain about the films of the lack of additional characters as will be added for the sake of the films of Springtime with Roo special or anything else like that. Like, I think that was the only Winnie the Pooh movie that does not feature Christopher Robin, which unlike in the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh does feature Christopher Robin with all these like 3 stories combined with Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, as well as the films of A Blustery Day and Tigger 2. Although technically they were expecting to able to bring in A Day for Eeyore, but of course A Day for Eeyore was not included in the sake of the films of The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. My guessing is probably because of the animation quality, or perhaps even maybe because of time constraints. So I'm guessing that might be some consumption. And whilst unlike in new forms of also for Pooh's Grand Adventure, the search for Christopher Robin, that Christopher Robin was in the actual film, and also say applies with Piglet's Big Movie, for some story arcs between the forms of, let's just say, Eureka, kind of, or just able to experience like North Pole, kind of story segment in Piglet's Big Movie, alongside with the forms of Pooh Corner segment as well, alongside with the forms of the ending portion of the film as well. And as far as I'm aware, he did somehow made his brief cameo appearance in during the films of the end credit sequence in Pooh's Heffalump movie, but that's besides the point. And I think that was also for the sake of the films of how the fact that maybe he did also appear in 2011 Winnie the Pooh movie, and that's as far as I can probably describe about it, I guess. So even then, no, yeah, I'll admit though right away though is about the fact that, like I said before, it is so nice about the fact that Springtime with Roo did somehow manage to came out 20 years ago, but I'll admit though, like I said earlier, it's definitely is not one of my favorites though. It's definitely my least favorite. So because of that though, I'm sorry for being so a little bit more of a biased, I guess, but that's just mainly because, well, it's just about the fact that there's not much else to it though, aside from just celebrating Easter, and that's all there is to really think about it. Although, then again, it does have some interesting narratives, like for instance with both Tigger and Rabbit are the only characters they did somehow manage to jump out of the book, and as a result, that was actually a cool idea. Like, why can't the actual focus could be all around Rabbit? Well, I know for a fact that Rabbit is the most important character after all, but even then though, I just have nothing else to say about that, I guess. So anyways though, and I did not meant to do that, but that's okay, because obviously, just like the ones how it does it in Klonoa Door to Phantomile, obviously every time whenever you do mess up when it comes to utilizing certain enemies and all that stuff, enemies will thankfully do respawn. So either way, we somehow made our way to the end of this level right here, so yeah, everything else will be come to go for this point. So oh, and one of the subjects when it comes to the forms of some winner nominations, as far as I'm aware, I did somehow manage to find out there are certain catalogs that did say worst, and as a result, they did somehow manage to get the full list of the forms of the worst rewards, ranging from the majority of Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey for some reason. Like, I understand about the fact that critics didn't like it, fans didn't like it either, but that's just mainly because it is such a disastrous movie as far as what this entire existence managed to able to well, came up with, which I honestly agree, because what in the heck just thought that was a good idea, and it's even bad enough they're making a sequel already, which obviously I'm still not gonna see it at all, because what have they done? Anyway, so, as far as I'm aware, the Worst Picture award goes to Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, and that also applies for the sake of the forms of the Worst Screenplay. That also goes to Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. And as far as I'm aware, the Worst Actor goes to John Voight or Voight Mercy, I think is what it says anyway. Worst Actress award goes to Megan Fox, Johnny, and Clyde. And supporting actress goes to Megan Fox in Expendables 4. And supporting actor reward goes to Sylvester Stallone in the forms of Expendables 4. And worst on-screen couple reward goes to Pooh and Piglet in, of course, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. And the worst remake, ripoff, or sequel, which is, of course, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. And the worst director award goes to Race Freak Waterfield, which is, of course, involves around Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. And Redeemer award goes to Fran Josh Sandra, I think is what it says anyway. Again, I apologize for that mispronunciation of that specific names, by the way, but that's besides the point as well. Oh, and on the subject when it comes to the forms of some unfortunate news has been happened, sadly though, is about the fact that Rooster Teeth is shutting down, which I'm not exactly sure how to explain about any of those things. Although, relatively speaking, that was about the fact that it knows what it is, I guess, when it comes to able to move on to specific parts worth noting for, or perhaps even maybe because of complications and all that stuff, but either way. Also, something's worth noting for this point as well, about the fact that when it comes to, like, more Mario stuff, they obviously do feature and stuff like that. Well, as it turns out, the LEGO Super Mario is actually getting some whole bunch of new sets is going to be coming. Not only for the sake of the forms of this year in 2024, but also with the forms of eventually until next year in 2025. Although, there was actually a teaser at the end for that particular LEGO Super Mario set, and as it turns out, it looks like Mario Kart is actually getting the LEGO Super Mario treatment until in 2025. Although, it does show us a bit of a teaser, so unfortunately Mario Kart is a long way out as its release is scheduled for 2025. So no actual images were shown, and a very brief teaser clip has shown at the event of the event. So yeah, at least we'll have to wait until specifically until next year. Probably for the sake of time, for the sake of able to celebrating its 40th anniversary of the Super Mario Bros. Franchise, which is understandable, because no matter what though, it looks like Mario's gonna get a massive money-making kind of LEGO sets or anything else like that for everyone around the world. So, but either way, so it looks like we've bumped into the forms of not only Leona, but also with the forms of Tad as well, for able to prepare ourselves with the first boss in the game, which it will be self-explanatory, so just be expected when it comes to, like, you know, first bosses, it will be self-explanatory. And it's also worth noting for, unlike in Door to Phantasy, where basically though we have to go through two phases of the actual boss fights. Like, for instance, for example, we get onto the first boss in the game right now, and generally speaking though is about the fact that we have to use one of those enemies as projectiles, and you have to toss one of them right onto its weak spot at its back. So generally speaking though, you have to do this for about a couple of times, and if you think this boss battle is done, well, we have to go through two phases. So this is phase number 1, by the way. So generally speaking though, it's about the fact that we have to avoid his little spiky attacks, although to be fair, he doesn't do that much on the first phase until the second phase that it will start to get a little bit challenging. So anyway, so we're now on to phase 2, where basically he now starts able to use his hands or anything else like that, and yeah, that's what happens if you manage able to press one of those shoulder bumpers, as far as I'm usually concerned, or the shoulder buttons I should say. So generally speaking though, the L button just allows Klonoa tosses his ring up in the air, and if you press the R button, then obviously Klonoa does this amazing pose. So either way though, that's as far as we can able to explain any of those things. So, although I would have liked to be able to explain about the forms of another topics worth noting for, well actually kind of thinking about it, there's also some more LEGO sets it's going to be releasing at some point, and once again on the 1st of August, but this time in 2024. And they're going to be bringing up the forms of not only 1, but 3 new LEGO sets for the Super Mario lineup. And those are Bowser Express Train set, and also there's the forms of King Boo's Haunted Mansion set, and finally, Battle with Roy at Princess Peach's Castle set. So, generally speaking though, at least we're about to be getting some even more Koopalings as far as I'm usually concerned. So, I'm pretty sure no matter what though, is about the fact that the final set includes the LEGO version of Roy to close out the lineup of Koopalings. So, we can able to expect to know. I'm not exactly sure if we're able to actually get ourselves the whole entire lineup for the majority of the Koopalings for the sake of the forms of the LEGO formation, although I'm also able to do a massive research so I can able to recap on specific parts. So, anyways though, so let's go and press the Y button or the A button, although to be fair, I always prefer pressing the Y button the most, because obviously since I'm pretty much more accustomed to that specific control configuration when it comes to likely for 2D platforming with all its Mario games and all that stuff, like B buttons to jump and Y is to dash. Well, that's just mainly because I'm pretty much more accustomed to that particular control format, except in New Super Mario Bros. Wii, just because in New Super Mario Bros. Wii only utilizes both the Wii mode sideways or the Wii mode to nunchuck combo, which to be fair though, I found that control scheme kind of awkward in, you know what I'm saying, with the Wii mode to nunchuck combo, so. But either way, so yeah, for what I've seen, the actual LEGO sets just recently, those look really cool. Although it does manage to able to contain a bunch, I mean a bunch of pieces for one of those specific LEGO sets. Specifically, Bowser's Train Express kind of set, or specifically Bowser's Express Train set. So, as a result, it took us a lot of hours to able to build this thing up. Especially, what I found was a little bit interesting is about the fact that it looks like it does manage to contain a puff of smoke that does come out the chimney, or specifically the funnel, as far as what I was going to say for this point. So, even then, no, that's as far as I can try to able to explain any of these things at the moment, I'm afraid, guys. Although, to be fair, though, we will explain about the forms of the most exciting thing, for last anyway, and that is about the fact that we got ourselves a full confirmation of the actual release dates between both Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door for the Nintendo Switch, and of course, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD has, also gets release date as well. Well, to be more specifically, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD to be exact. That, yeah, both of those games have finally confirmed its release dates, and I'm very excited for those. Somehow, as far as I've noticed, is that Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is going to be releasing way later than the forms of how it does it on Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Remake on Switch. Because as far as I'm aware, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door on Switch is going to be releasing at some point on May 23rd in this year, obviously, to mark the 20th anniversary of the original game's release on the GameCube, which makes sense. And as far as Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, it's going to be releasing at some point on June 27th in 2024. So that seems interesting enough. Especially, what's even interesting about this is though, is that the actual game's release schedule, as far as I'm aware, is now going to be pushing on to Thursdays this time, as opposed to Friday, which I'm not exactly sure why it did somehow change the actual release schedule for the sake of the forms of those gaming releases. I'm sure that Maxi will explain more about it if he goes back onto Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 after all. But either way though, so it looks like our next objective is that we need to find the next element. And where do we find it exactly? Well, we have to simply go into Joland right here, which appears to be like a carnival setting. So with that being said folks, is that we got the endings of this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Klonoa Phantasy Reverie series. In Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil is about the fact that we're about to investigate in Joland. So I will see you guys next time. Later fellas.